Hello, BookTube. You know, you might think that what with getting 10 books a day in the mail here and having a workload of pending assignments that's heavy enough to crush a hippopotamus, that I wouldn't do a whole lot of window shopping, but I can't help it. I love books. I live, eat, and breathe them. And like everyone else on BookTube, there are books coming out down the pike that I haven't received yet that I'm very much looking forward to. I get a lot of books in advance of publication date, but that still applies to me. And I was going over some of those the other day. I was just idly making wish lists, really making wish lists, stuff that I really hope I get, and that I really hope I get a chance to write about. And I thought, why not share it? Why not share some of them? So I wanted to try that. I'm going to try and use the iPad to give you visuals, so you have something to look at other than the small Park Stars that I acquired in 1792. But the iPad acts up in any kind of light. It's perfectly okay if I'm watching Netflix in the dark. But if there's any other light anywhere, sometimes it goes completely black on camera. So we're going to try this and just hope. And the first book that I want to show you is a subject that we've talked about on this channel before, because I got a reprint about it. This is a new book coming out. And let's see if we can do this. It's A Lie Too Big to Fail by Lisa Pease. And it is a new soup to nuts examination of the assassination of Robert Kennedy. That goes into all kinds of variables. We've talked on this channel before about how the thing that makes a conspiracy theory interesting is if there's a hook. Not the stuff that crazy people talk about, where a crazy person assumes there's a conspiracy and then fills in the blanks. No, a hook is the thing in a conspiracy theory that a normal person can look at and say, okay, that doesn't make sense. The rest of this, with the Illuminati and people firing ice bullets from sewer drains, that's all obvious crackpot nonsense. But that detail actually doesn't make sense. The thing, I think, that gives these things their multi-generational appeal, one generation, the generation that suffers a tragedy, will have people who psychologically will react by saying that tragedy could not have happened. There must be something more to it. But that wouldn't survive generation to generation unless there was actually a hook. Somebody who has no visceral connection to a subject needs that hook in order to start investigating it. And oh my God, the death of Bobby Kennedy has so many hooks. And it looks like this book is going to examine a lot of them. I don't know. I'll have to see with all of these books. I'll have to see. But the forensics is the strongest hook for the JFK assassination. It's actually one of the weakest hooks for the RFK assassination. With RFK, the hooks come in much more tangible, pragmatic dimensions. Who reported what to when? What happened to the evidence? What happened to the eyewitness accounts? And I have read every book on the subject, and I just recently reread Shadowplay, which we saw on this channel, which is a reprint of a very good one. I'm perfectly happy to add another one to the list, so that's the first one I want to show you. The next one is for you comic book fans. I've mentioned before that Marvel Comics has been doing for years now, decades now, they've been doing a very nice hardcover, full-color reprint line called Marvel Masterworks. And unlike their paperback reprint line, the Epic Collection, the Marvel Masterworks are inexorably moving forward. So they start out with a volume collecting the first 6 issues of the Fantastic Four. In color, usually corrected color, on nice, high-quality paper, and then they just move on, volume by volume by volume by volume. They're not jumping around according to fan-favorite stories or artists or writers. They're just doing it chronologically, story by story. Which means that with Marvel Masterworks, you will have uneven stuff. That means that almost never will you have a Marvel Masterworks volume where everything is great from start to finish in the volume. It does sometimes happen, but usually not. And the one that I want to mention now is a Marvel Masterworks, the latest, the one that's coming out in the winter for Thor. Let's see, it's this right here. It's Marvel Masterworks, Mighty Thor, volume 17. They're up to 17. And the draw here will be that the lead issues in this reprint run are drawn by Walt Simonson, who those of you who are comic book fans will associate his name with Thor, because after this run, a little while later, he came on to Thor as artist and writer with a much advanced artist style, and did one of the most definitive runs on Thor that's ever been done. Just an incredible thing. And that gives his name a sort of sale cachet with Thor. And he does the first few issues here, he draws them. I think he's inked by Joe Sinnott. He's written by Len Wein, and they're not very good. Those first few issues, there's one that stars Iron Man, there are a couple of real-world adventures. They aren't particularly good. But since the Marvel Masterworks volumes just march on, the last batch of issues in this volume is a totally different creative team. It's Roy Thomas and John Buscema who've done such great work together. They are a team up for the ages in terms of classic Marvel comics. And they did a series in Thor that didn't look like it fit anywhere in continuity. I absolutely loved it. Where an ordinary human, a tall, red-haired human, suddenly magically becomes an incarnation of the classical mythological Thor. Because the mythological Thor doesn't look like that. He doesn't have long blonde hair and polka dot sleeveless costume. He wore fur and Viking helmet, and he had a red beard, and he had a magic belt and magic gloves, and this mortal gets that ability, and the writer brings in all kinds of Norse mythology about Ragnarok, and it's just amazing. It's amazingly good. And then it stopped and just went back to normal Thor stories. So I have those issues in a box here somewhere. I reread them periodically because they're very good. I remember reading them at the time and thinking, boy, this is totally different, isn't it? And here they're going to be in a hardcover volume with archival binding, so that I won't have to dig through cardboard boxes and gingerly turn pages in floppy magazines anymore. So I'm looking forward to that. Then the next one that I'm looking forward to, you might think I wouldn't be looking forward to, because it's a biography of someone that I don't think deserves the adulation that he's received for 60 or 75 years. And I certainly could go the rest of my life without reading another biography of him. This is a perfect example, and it's not the only one on this list, of something I am eagerly looking forward to, not for the subject matter, but for the author. And that's this: Churchill, Walking with Destiny, by Andrew Roberts, who is determined to get under my skin. He's determined to get my goat, because his last book was a huge biography of Napoleon Bonaparte. And I think Napoleon Bonaparte and Winston Churchill are two of the most overrated human beings in the history of the species. This is a 1,000-page biography of Churchill that will come out and will be poised. It will. Napoleon the Great was a 1,000-page biography of Napoleon Bonaparte, and it sold like the dickens. And this thing, coming out poised for the holiday book season, is going to sell 10 times as much. Just this is the book to retire on, although I hope Andy Roberts doesn't ever retire. And I'm going to read it, even though I have read every huge biography of Winston Churchill and multi-volume biographies of Winston Churchill. There isn't anything new to bring to a biography like this. I will read this anyway, and I will read it eagerly, because Andrew Roberts is such a fantastic writer. He's one of those writers you never miss, even when he tries your patience. So I'm gonna read this thing. The same thing is true for the next book, which is another example of a book that I'll be reading mainly for its author, because there was a great book on this subject years ago that I don't think could be topped. And this is called Heirs of the Founders by H.W. Brands, about Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun and Daniel Webster and the second generation of founding fathers of America, the second generation of these titanic, great, smart, evil men. And there was a book, some of you who are fans of history will probably remember it, called The Great Triumvirate, that came out, oh God, it must be 50 years ago, 40 years ago now, and was tremendously good. I don't think I have a copy, and I'd be willing to bet, because fate is the way it is, I'd be willing to bet that the closer we get to this book getting into my hot little hands, the more likely it is that I will find a copy of The Great Triumvirate at the Brattle Bookshop. Book Kismet so often works that way, where I will see something coming down the pike, and I will find something essentially connected to it at the Brattle. But anyway, this is another example where these three don't particularly interest me, even Webster. But I wouldn't miss the book anyway, but I'm going to be eager to get it because of Brands, because he's just fantastic. I'm such a fan of most of what he does that I'll read anything. So when I saw this, I was very grateful for it. Then the next one is a reprint. There are a few reprints here. The Thor Marvel Masterworks is a reprint. There are a few reprints on this list because I can look forward to them because I know already that I like them. Whereas if I see a new novel coming out, even by an author that I know, I can't always completely look forward to it because it might stink. But a proven quantity, no. And the next one is the Library of America. Those of you who might not be familiar with it, it's a reprint series of American classics done with sewn binding and acid-free pages, a built-in bookmark. Very little in the way of editorial interference. There's almost never an introduction. There are almost never any notes to speak of. Just you and the text in these beautiful uniform editions. And they're doing this. They're doing a volume of James Fenimore Cooper, 2 novels of the American Revolution. The Spy is the first one, and Lionel Lincoln is the second one, which is the subtitle of Lionel Lincoln is The Leaguer of Boston. And James Fenimore Cooper, of course, is best known for his Leatherstocking tales, and they're terrific, the Natty Bumppo stories. But I love all of his historical fiction. I think it's all fantastically good. I mean, it's not Wolf Hall. It's not meant to be really intelligent, but it's so entertaining and so meaty and so eloquent. When he gets his characters up on a stem winding, there's nobody like him. And that actually happens in the Natty Bumppo stories as well. People always think of Hawkeye as being this rough-hewn outdoorsman. But when he talks about the natural world for any length of time, more than a grunted line or two, it's lovely. It's prose poetry. And I can't wait to see. I don't have any idea when the last time was that I owned a copy of The Spy, and I don't think I've ever owned a copy of Lionel Leonard. I think I only read it in the libraries. So I'm looking forward to that. And the next one is also a reprint. And I have to say, I'm kind of happy about it. Ordinarily, politically correct gestures like this leave me cold, because a lot of times, most of the time, politically correct gestures in the 21st century aren't done to fix a problem. They're done to cast moral aspersions on people who don't think the problem should be fixed, if that makes any sense. They're designed to browbeat and virtue signal, and that drives me nuts. That drives me nuts. I don't need to check my moral bona fides with anyone, and neither do you. I don't know where we went wrong in life to all of a sudden have this cadre of self-appointed morality cops over our shoulder every time we move. But ordinarily, I hate gestures like that. But in this case, it's not only good, it's long overdue. This is the great Sidney Lanier, whose name will not be known to many of you. And this is King Arthur. See, we're losing the light here. Here, let's try and do as good as we can here. It figures the light would go on the one that's the most visually amazing. Let's see. Well, okay, that's fairly good. This is Sidney Lanier, King Arthur, and it's the old Scribner Classics, where the book is given in a big, heavy binding with artwork by Wyeth. Full-color Wyeth paintings in all these things. They're absolute classics. You find them from time to time. They reprint them from time to time. And the King Arthur volume is just delightful. Sidney Lanier was such a fan. Can we do anything with this at all? No? Well, you get the hint. I wish I could put pictures in the description field. I really wish I could. But the reason that I mention this as a politically correct gesture, some of you will know if you know this book. Isn't that lovely, though? God almighty. Some of you will know this was originally called The Boy's King Arthur. 50, 60, 70 years ago when it was first printed, it was called The Boy's King Arthur. It was, these are tales of daring do and knights in armor fighting monsters and bad guys. This is a perfect present to give a boy. And even at the time, I knew girls who loved King Arthur stories. They absolutely loved it. And also, I might add, the King Arthur stories, even in Sidney Lanier's fairly PC retelling, but certainly in Mallory, the King Arthur stories contain more than their fair share of badass women. So I never really understood that. That kind of thing is egregious. And that kind of correction, I do agree with in the 21st century, when we don't make, static presuppositional judgments like that, and even when we did make them, they were wrong. In that case, I want this to be called just King Arthur, not a boy's King Arthur. So, but I I'm looking forward to it mainly because I'm sure that I don't have a copy. I get the Scribner Illustrated Classics with Wyeth illustrations all the time. Whenever I see them at the Brattle, I grab them. But then I end up giving them away or sending them to people or leaving them I volunteer with kids once a month here in Boston. And I will often bring them whatever I find that they might like, and they love those volumes, so I'll just leave them there. And then the next one is not a reprint. It's a new book. And it's not going to be palatable to a lot of you. I already know that I have like 5 editors other than Open Letters Review, the literary journal, the online literary journal where I'm an editor. It's our house, so I don't need to ask permission to review something there. But I already know that the 5 editors who run my work outside of Open Letters Review will all say no to this book. They don't even want to think about it, much less read it, much less read a review of it. But it's by Rob Dunn, and it's called Never Home Alone. I wish you could make out the details of the cover, but I'll read you the subtitle. That ought to do it. From microbes to millipedes, camel crickets, and honeybees, the natural history of where we live. And the book is apparently all about the innumerable creatures that we share our homes with. We don't like to think about it, but they're innumerable. And if you were to take a little home security infrared, one of those little nodule cameras, and put it on a low shelf, point it at the floor of your kitchen, your bathroom, your living room, and turn it on overnight while you're asleep, and then watch the footage in the morning, you would be horrified. You are colonized. Thoroughly colonized. It's like a friend of mine used to say. I would when I would talk to him about Gordon Grice's great book, The Red Hourglass, which is all about, poisonous animals, and the standout chapter in that book is the chapter on the brown recluse spider and the horrors that its venom can inflict on human bodies. And I used to tell a friend of mine how horrifying I found that chapter, and how you're never going to catch me rummaging around in a log pile or old refuse dump or anything like that. And he said, I hate to cause you any sleepless nights, but you've got a brown recluse spider looking at you right now. I guarantee it. If you live in the American Northeast, you have a brown recluse spider looking at you right now. That's what this is going to be. It's going to be all that. All the animals that live in your home. And it's not quite as traumatic for me as it will be for a lot of people, because I have eaten a lot of these animals when out and about. Slugs, millipedes, stuff like that. When you are out hiking, they're an absolute godsend. They are easy, defenseless sources of protein that require no preparation. But for most people, the idea that they have millipedes in their bathroom, but you do. But anyway, the next one is a huge thing. It's probably the single thing that I am most eagerly looking forward to this winter. I will probably be, unless I'm very much mistaken, it will probably be, I hate to say it because it's so reductive, but it will probably be my favorite book of 2018. And we've seen it already. We saw it in the catalog. It's this. It's the Hebrew Bible, translated in 3 hardcover volumes in a slipcase by Robert Alter, who did the 5 books of Moses already. And he's done a bunch of other stuff already, but the 5 books of Moses was also done in a beautiful slipcase. And it's a trailblazing, totally idiosyncratic reworking of the Hebrew Bible with tons of explanatory notes. It's just an utterly self-contained world, a total experience of reading. And I know that already because I've read large chunks of this, but I can't wait to get the whole thing and just go through it from start to finish. I just can't wait. So that's on the list. And then there's a modern library version here. There's a modern library volume. They sometimes do lots of reprints as well. They'll sometimes do original anthologies that are just wonderful. You want to collect them all. And this is one of them. It's called, see if you can make that out, Dear Los Angeles, which is, it's not so bad. I wish it were brighter. Sorry. I'll list all these down below anyway. This is a volume writing about Los Angeles for over 4 centuries. And you've probably noticed in your reading adventures, I certainly have, the way Los Angeles brings out the energy and the sex appeal and the poetry of the people who write about it. It's amazing. I myself have always found a complete dichotomy between the beauty of the writing that Los Angeles evokes and actually living in Los Angeles. I've spent only a little time there, and it was horrific. It feels like living there feels like having a sunburn. So, it's got all of the nerve jangling, just peace stripping, raucous energy of New York City. But it's missing something. It just has that energy. It doesn't have anything else. But I could be wrong. Certainly, I know a whole bunch of people who live and work in and around the Hollywood industry, and they have houses up in the hills, and they love it. Maybe because they don't have to spend much time there. But one way or another, I love the writing about it. Absolutely love the writing about it. And this book is a big collection of that. Dear Los Angeles. So I can't wait. And then the last book that we'll do here is a novel. And it's a new novel. I mentioned a minute ago that I look at a new novel by someone, even if it's an author that I like, and I don't know whether or not I eagerly want to read it because it could stink. That might certainly be true in this case. But this is an author who has proven himself to me so many times that I will be deeply interested in his book, even if it does stink. And that's William Gibson, the author of Neuromancer, which is a science fiction book that changed the zeitgeist. And this is his new book, Agency, with a kind of attractive cover there. And I read a brief glimpse of what it's about. It's futuristic, it's technological. It's not a radical departure for him, but he's one of those writers where I want to know what his brain is doing, and I'm eager to read it anyway. It's, I admit, the least eager of this batch. The rest of these things are just home runs. But that's a short list of stuff that I don't have yet, that I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on, even if it ends up disappointing me. So I've seen so many booktubers make a video like this. I thought I'd make one myself, just for the fun of it. But I'll wrap it up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.